It started with a barrel, a simple wine barrel dispenser made from recycled wood that I found at a Sunday market. Beautiful, rustic, with a brass tap and everything. A charming piece that gave my balcony an air of suburban Tuscany. Was it expensive? A little, but it was worth every penny, not just for the aesthetics, but for the feeling of personal victory of finally having my own little corner, with things my own way, after months of swallowing the bureaucratic demands of that condominium that was more regulated than an airport. I've never been the problem neighbor. I've always paid on time. I've never abused the sound. I've always complied with the HOA's idiotic demands, even when they seem to have been written by someone who drinks tea with vinegar at 4 in the afternoon. But that barrel, that seemed to have triggered an alert in some part of her brain. The woman in the front lot, the same woman who had already picked on the color of my outdoor cushion because the blue clashed with the natural color palette of the room. She saw the barrel one sunny Sunday when she walked past with that dog that wears more clothes than people. She stopped for a few seconds, stared at it, frowned, and wrote something down on her cell phone, as if the barrel was an architectural crime, and she was the urban morality inspector. She didn't say anything, just that this doesn't fit in with the style of the neighborhood look, as if the neighborhood had a notarized visual identity. The next morning, a notice appeared on my doorstep, the same handwriting, the same scented paper. It said that rustic wooden items did not comply with the European standard in Sector C of the residential building, and that the dispenser had to be removed within 72 hours. Seriously, European standard, in the middle of a suburban community, where half the houses have plastic flamingos in the garden, and where she herself kept a decorative scarecrow in the fall that looked like it came out of a B-horror movie. Of course, I didn't take the barrel off. Not at that moment. It wasn't just an ornament. It was a symbol. The symbol of my patience running out with those people who think the world needs to fit inside their narrow heads. And I took a deep breath, put the note aside, and went about my life. I thought that, like everything else with this woman, it would pass, that she would find something else to oversee, but it didn't. 2 days later, the barrel was gone. Just like that. One day it was there, with half a sangria resting inside, and the next, empty. The balcony seemed to have been invaded by a decorative ghost of the Inquisition, and the most revolting thing was that there was no sign of a break-in. No broken gate, no camera showing suspicious movement. Just a dry, silent disappearance, like everything else she did. It took me hours to process what had happened. I kept going around in circles trying to figure out if I'd been mugged, if someone was playing a trick on me, or if I'd simply gone mad. But then came the confirmation. In the afternoon of that same day, driving down the back street of the condominium, I saw it. The barrel. My barrel. In her backyard. In the corner of the gourmet area, next to a frog fountain that she swore was feng shui. There it was, with an embroidered towel on top, 2 glasses next to it, and an Instagram post that said, "Sunday brunch with rustic European charm." I was out of breath. I'm not one to get worked up over little things, but there are limits. Stealing someone else's barrel, changing the address, and then posting it as your own? That's not just an act. That's the look of polished marble. I went home, gritting my teeth, filed a complaint with the HOA, emailed the board, called the number that never answers, did everything the conduct manual says. And, as expected, I received a generic reply saying that it was not possible to verify the provenance of the item in question, and that, in the absence of concrete evidence, no action could be taken. Of course, because if I don't have a recording of her dragging the barrel on her back like a psychopathic mule at 3 in the morning, technically, it's not mine. Even with the watermark, the craftsman's signature on the base, and the copper tap that I installed myself. That's when I realized that this woman had not only invaded my space, but had been backed by a whole system of accomplices. An entire condominium that turns a blind eye to madness disguised as community zeal. And me? I took a deep breath. Again. Only this time, not to swallow. I breathed to plan. Because if she wanted Cold War, I was going to deliver nuclear winter. She thought she could steal, look sophisticated, and come out on top, but she didn't count on the fact that I have free time, a good memory, and a spirit of revenge fueled by sour currants, passive hatred, and a small bottle of skunk pee that a friend got me out of pure solidarity. Did she want a keg? There was going to be a keg, only filled with the deserved. I didn't go to sleep that night, not because I was afraid or dwelling on the material loss of the barrel, but because my head was on a loop, replaying the scene of her sitting in the backyard as if she were the host of a commercial, flaunting what was mine with a smile that screamed, "Fuck off, asshole!" And then, my brother, if there's one thing that moves me more than anger, it's the taste of seeing arrogance tripping over its own heels. She wanted the barrel so badly? Let her have it. But not in the way she imagined. I spent the next 2 days planning what would be the dirtiest, most symbolic and satisfying operation I've ever done in my life. First, I needed to confirm one thing, that the barrel was still being used as the centerpiece of the new gourmet spot in her house. All I had to do was look at her Instagram, because she's one of those. She can't do anything without posting, without cheesy captions, without that filter that looks like Vaseline has been rubbed on the lens. And there it was, artisan wine served with love straight from Tuscany to my backyard, written below a photo of 3 glasses on top of my barrel. The detail she didn't see, or pretended not to see, was that the label that came with it was still stuck to the side, with the inscription, "Property of Diego's Barrel Co." You can't even peel the sticker off. This woman's audacity is so great that she didn't even bother to erase the trace, because, for her, what isn't hers can become hers if she just says it is. Only now I had the perfect cue. The next step was to find the secret ingredient. I needed something that was disgusting but seemed natural, something that wouldn't leave clues, but would wreak havoc. And then, like everything in life that involves revenge done right, fate conspired in my favor. An acquaintance who works in pest control commented in the family group that he had just caught 2 possums in a shed. Guess who showed up in the group saying, "Get me the biological material"? That's right, me. He thought I was joking. I wasn't. I explained briefly, without much detail, and the next day he discreetly left a small bottle of skunk pee in my garage, sealed, with a label. I have no idea how he got it, nor do I want to know. I just thanked him with a case of beer and asked for absolute secrecy. The second component was easier, sour gooseberries. And not just any currant, one that had expired 6 months ago and that I found in the back of my mother's cupboard, the queen of the war pantry. I mixed the 2 in a cut-up PET bottle, stirred it with a piece of wood, and left the mixture to rest for 2 days in a bucket with a lid, well away from the house, because the smell was stomach-turning. It was as if I had bottled my own sin. Now came the tricky part, refilling the barrel without being seen. I'm not the ninja type, but this neighborhood has one advantage for those who want to go unnoticed. No one looks away. People are so concerned with looking like everything is fine that they pretend they don't see their neighbor's chaos. So I took advantage of a cloudy, almost rainy night, put on a cap, an old sweatshirt, and walked around like someone who wants nothing. I took a hand pump with me, the kind you use to inflate a bicycle tire, adapted with a thin hose that fit just right on the barrel's tap, an improvised technique, but effective. I jumped over the side wall of her house, which isn't as high as she thinks. I crouched down between some bushes, held back my laughter, and performed the transfusion. It took me just over 5 minutes to replace the rosé wine she'd bought in bulk with the infernal concoction I'd dubbed the vintage of revolt. I closed everything up, cleaned the hose, went out the same way I came in, and came home with my soul washed clean. I almost slept hugging the firecracker, like a soldier returning from war. Over the next few days, she disappeared from social media. No photos, no brunch, no magazine cover pose. But it was on Monday, at 5:48 p.m., that my revenge was completed, like a dish served cold and stinking. The neighborhood group started popping up with mysterious messages. Has anyone else smelled something strange coming from House 17? It looks like they've opened a sewer near the lake. I've had a headache ever since I walked up the street. I read each message like someone watching the World Cup final, eating popcorn, waiting for her name to appear, and when it did, it was art. A neighbor posted, unfiltered, "Guys, I went for wine at brunch and got sick. Is that right? It tasted like vinegar with something rotten in it." Another replied, "My husband threw up in the car on the way back. I'm outraged." And that was that. The public meltdown began. She tried to delete the posts. She tried to send a private message, but it was too late. The group had turned into a courtroom. People commented that the drink smelled like a wet rat, that "I'll never step foot in her house again," and even those who said they were going to sue her for food poisoning. I remained silent. Not a single emoji. Nothing. Just watching. Because real revenge doesn't need applause. It needs a witness. And I had a whole neighborhood to watch the downfall of the woman who thought she could steal and be a star. And the best thing of all? She couldn't prove anything. Nothing. If she said it was me, it would sound like paranoia. If she investigated, she'd find nothing but the lingering smell of an indecipherable liquid that now lived at the bottom of the barrel. What did she do? She disappeared, locked down her social networks, canceled the next HOA brunch, and, of course, removed the barrel from the outdoor area. But then came the part I wasn't expecting. The barrel reappeared in the trash, in one piece, with a free sign hanging from it, as if it were a cursed item from a horror movie. Nobody picked it up. It stayed there for 3 days, moldy, abandoned, ignored even by the collectors. And there was the symbol of the fall, my barrel, now emptied, stinking, discarded by those who stole it as a status trophy and saw it become their social ruin. Me? I walked past it every day with my head held high. I didn't even touch it. I left it there, rotting away as a living reminder that not everyone bows their head to the tyranny of the condominium. Seeing that barrel lying on the sidewalk with the little handwritten sign saying "free" was the height of poetry. The same object that had been ripped off my balcony in the middle of the night and transformed into a chic piece of decoration was now there, dirty, rejected, forgotten, cursed, as if every drop of my revenge cocktail had poisoned not only the wine, but the ego of the woman who had tried to climb the ladder at the expense of what wasn't hers. It was like watching an empire collapse in slow motion. The difference was that, instead of shrapnel, only the remains of a barrel became a symbol of shame. The neighborhood, of course, pretended nothing had happened. Because that's standard protocol around here. If something is too embarrassing, we pretend we didn't see it. No one talked about the contaminated wine, much less the veiled accusations that began to circulate in the neighborhood group. But the smell continued. Some people said that even after it had been thrown away, the barrel still seemed to exude the scent of tragedy. Some people swore they could smell it just by walking by. I thought it was an exaggeration, but I refused to deny it. I let the legend grow, because a good revenge is one that becomes a myth that no one can prove, but everyone feels. And then came the most interesting part. She disappeared. The woman who, until the other day, was omnipresent, dispensing rules, glances, and judgments, simply disappeared from the radar. No more walking her decorated dog. No more checking other people's gardens. No more talking about European practices of sustainable coexistence. Her social media has become a desert. No photo of a flower. No self-help quote. No selfie with an angelic filter. The disappearance was so complete that some people thought she had traveled. Others said she was recovering, as if she had been through a national trauma. But I knew it was nothing of the sort, what she was ashamed of. And worse than shame, she had to swallow her own poison without being able to blame anyone. Because even her closest friends, the ones who always clapped for every post about wine and brunch, now avoided mentioning her name. afraid of being associated with the fiasco. Here, reputation is more valuable than gold. And with a single public humiliation, she melted hers down. She didn't need me anymore. She dug her own hole. I, on the other hand, have never been lighter. Not because I took revenge. That was just the cherry on top. But because I restored something she tried to snatch away. The right to exist in one's own space, without being policed by people who think they own the truth. I started walking more calmly. My yard had ambient sound again, my plants grew back without judgment, and the balcony? Ah, the balcony. I transformed the space where the barrel used to stand into a new, even better corner. I added a rustic table, some hanging glasses, and a new dispenser, only this time in stainless steel, with a lock. Not because I thought she'd try it again, but because trauma teaches. The most comical part was when, 2 weeks later, a new neighbor moved in next door. Young, friendly, full of life. On the second day, she came over to introduce herself. She offered me a lemon cake and said that she had heard rumors that this street had some kind of intense figures. I almost choked with laughter. I just said, "You'll get used to it," because part of me wanted to tell you everything, tell you the whole story, show you prints, photos, proof. But the other part, the one that won, knew that the best answer was to live well. But like every good story, there was one more detail, a missing piece of the puzzle. One afternoon, while I was clearing the dry leaves from the yard, I saw her husband. Yes, the one who had always been a decorative shadow, the same one who waved without opening his mouth, now alone, picking up paper on the front lawn with the face of someone who wanted to evaporate. He stopped for a few seconds, looked at me and, for the first time, spoke. 3 words. Low, almost swallowed. "It was you, wasn't it?" I gave a half smile, without confirming or denying it. I just shook my head slightly and went back to sweeping. He didn't insist. He just made an almost imperceptible gesture, like someone silently thanking me for something they can't say out loud. And then he went on, returning home with lighter steps. That got to me, because there, in that gesture, there was more truth than all the HOA meetings this neighborhood has ever had. The woman never showed up again. There was a rumor that she had asked to step down as president of the HOA, citing personal problems. The position was open for weeks. No one wanted to take over. No one wanted to inherit the empty throne of tyranny. And what was supposed to be a prestigious position became a symbol of failed oppression. In the end, someone took the barrel. A stranger. One rainy night, I saw a car stop, a figure get out, check the item and throw it in the trunk. I don't know who did it, nor do I want to. I let it go. It had done its job. Today, when I look at my balcony, I see more than furniture and plants. I see a trench that became a victory, a reminder that freedom needs to be defended even in places where war disguises itself as regulation, where oppression comes with a little flower on the card, and where the enemy wears a linen blazer and talks about feng shui. But above all, I see that sometimes justice doesn't come with a shout or a lawsuit. It comes in silence, with the smell of skunk and the taste of sour currants. The curious thing after a well-executed revenge is the silence. Not the uncomfortable silence of someone waiting for the next punch, but the complete silence of someone who knows that the final punch has already been thrown. It hurt, and now all that's left to do is enjoy the echo. She's gone, as I said, but the hole she left wasn't just hers. It was her structure, which she had set up with such zeal. The basis of her domination wasn't force, it was collective embarrassment. It was the social fear of not fitting in, and when that breaks down, there's nowhere to hide. The residents began to loosen up. The new neighbor put up a bright red hammock on her balcony, something that would never have been tolerated 2 months earlier. An older couple started putting beach chairs in front of the garage and sunbathing as if they were in Copacabana. A teenager painted the gate of her house with temporary graffiti for her schoolwork, and nobody even complained. The air became lighter, more honest, as if everyone was testing the possibilities now that the behavior police had been deactivated. She tried to come back, little by little. One week she appeared at the corner market, looked at me from afar, and pretended not to recognize me. She was different, not physically, but in her posture, smaller, less upright. The haughtiness she used to exude like expensive perfume now seemed stale, diluted in a presence that just wanted to go unnoticed. It didn't work. People saw her and crossed the street. It was no longer fear, it was shame. The kind of thing that sticks and won't go away with rebranding. She tried to publish a post after weeks of disappearance. An organic dish, a text about overcoming. Nobody liked it, no one commented, nobody shared it. It was as if she had thrown a piece of paper into the wind and it had fallen straight to the ground. She was, for the first time, living in the exact place where she had put everyone for years. Social indifference. But I, contrary to what many people thought, didn't continue to provoke. I didn't talk about the barrel. I didn't make a joke. I didn't spread the word or tell everyone the story. Because my intention was never to be the neighborhood hero. I just wanted my space, my respect, and, above all, the right not to be stepped on by a woman with a monarch complex in a middle-class neighborhood. The barrel was just an object, but it became a symbol. And now that everything has passed, the lesson and the memory remain. Because even if she never appears in the HOA again, even if she moves house, even if she tries to rebuild her reputation elsewhere, those who saw it, saw it. Those who lived, remember. And those who have learned, carry it with them forever. I've learned, for example, that there are people who need to be in control because they can't control their own lives. And when that person gains micropower, like the presidency of a neighborhood association, they turn that small authority into a theater of grandeur. They dress up as civilians, but they just want to mold the world to their own discomfort. I've also learned that you can't confront these types of people with a shout. They thrive on scandal, shouting matches, and explicit conflict. You win in the detail, in the mistakes they make when they think no one is watching, in the overconfidence that turns into exposure, in what they themselves spit out without realizing they're spitting it up. And finally, I realized that there's no point in running away from people like that. There will be a version of them everywhere, at school, at work, in the family. What you can do is not give in. Don't normalize the absurd just because it comes disguised as a regulation, tradition, or collective common sense. After all this, the HOA even tried to reorganize itself. They set up a temporary committee, called on residents to give their opinions, and made room for new proposals. The first suggestion approved was simple but symbolic. Each house could have one item of external decoration without prior approval. A colorful chair, a different lamp, a barrel. The staff laughed when they read that last word. One or two even looked at me. I pretended not to understand, but inside, it was like receiving an invisible medal. The kind of recognition that doesn't need applause, because the taste of victory is in the concrete change, not in the pose. Today, my new dispenser is still on the balcony. Functional, beautiful, theft-proof. But honestly, it doesn't matter that much, because what I celebrate isn't the object, it's the freedom that came after it. The certainty that even in the most suffocating communities, there is room for resistance, even if it comes in the form of sour gooseberries and skunk pee. And every time someone walks past my house and says, "What a nice corner," I reply with a smile that hides the whole story behind it. Because sometimes, what seems like just a decorative detail is actually the silent trophy of a war, won without a word. And you know what? If I could go back, I'd do it all over again, just the same. I'd just add a little more vinegar. Don't forget to leave your like and opinion in the comments.